thank you everyone for joining us today for this talk, for the IGCP648 virtual seminar. As you know, I'm Luc, I'm your host. And for today's talk, we are having Professor Timothy Kusky, Director of the Center for Global Tectonics at China University of Geosciences in Wuhan. Sorry for my pronunciation. And today, Tim will present vestige of early Earth type subduction recorded in Archean ophiolites, podiform chromitites. So, Tim, the audience is all yours.
So, Luke, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for everybody who has signed on. And for the talk today, first I'll give a little background about some controversial ideas about the early Earth that some of us agree and disagree with, and that's really fun. And then I will talk about some stuff that's not published. And I really welcome your opinions about our data to help us interpret things, because we have some work in review that you will see very soon. So the basic idea that you will see is from this first slide. The screen is shared, right? I can't tell what's being shared.
Yeah, everything's working perfectly.
Okay, so the basic idea that I want to try to suggest right now is that we have subduction of a continent that used to have an oceanic slab attached to it, and some little bits of that, the carbonate platform and parts of the oceanic slab, got incorporated into the mantle wedge, probably by serpentinite diapirs as the slab was rolling back, and they got trapped by these bonanitic type melts that formed podiform chromites that made a phoric ophiolite that was later incorporated into an accretionary melange. And now we have some ultra high pressure minerals, including TiO2, that suggest that these things got subducted to greater than 270 kilometers. And also we have the chromite phase that is actually Cheminite phase, which shows that it was formed at greater than 410 kilometers. And this is interesting, not only for the subduction and the tectonics, showing that subduction was probably pretty deep in the Archean, but it has something to do with what a lot of us have to think about how our science relates to life on Earth, because this is part of the Changsup, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, phosphorus cycle that is part of life, showing that it was going on very early on Earth. So this is my conclusion. And now I'll get to the data. But before we get to the data, let's talk about the different ideas. So one of the big arguments in science right now, Mike Brown is here, he's one of the big proponents of this, is when did plate tectonics start? Okay, and I like to take it from the other side of the coin, I say. I don't like to say, when did plate tectonics start? I like to say, when can you show me that plate tectonics did not operate? Okay, so we're looking at it from completely different perspectives, other sides of the coin, but we're asking the same question from different ways, and that really helps to advance the science, in my opinion. So we apply the null hypothesis. If we can explain it with plate tectonics, with higher heat flow and stuff like that, using basically uniformitarian, then we don't have to use imaginary things like drip tectonics or stagnant lids. We can just say we can gradually change the way plate tectonics worked with higher heat production on the early Earth and see how far back we can push that. So that's a different approach to the science, but we're looking at the same things from different philosophical perspectives. So from my perspective, I would look at what is the evidence for plate tectonics and say we look for plate boundary processes or evidence of plate boundary processes like strike subfaults or subduction zone accretionary wedges or oceanic crust lithosphere that's accreted in accretionary origins, and things like that. Distinctive rock records left there. And this can also be applied to the metamorphic record to look for things like paired metamorphic belts or things like that that show the asymmetry of subduction with cold on one side and hot on the other side that Mike is very familiar with because he wrote the papers on it. So in this talk, I want to focus on how do we start to try to quantify how do we recognize plate tectonics in very old rocks, right? We can look for the size of the largest plates, like the Superior Craton is a couple thousand kilometers across, but that's only 2.7 billion years ago. We can look for the depths of subduction in the Archean. That's what I want to focus on today. We can look for time durations of different tectonic cycles, balances between rates of extension and magma supply at mid-ocean ridges, or we can try to quantify lateral transport of different terrains to see if we have horizontal tectonics. Many different things. So this is just my thought about how we quantify this. So the question is, how deep was subduction in the Archean? So I put this picture here from a paper I wrote a long time ago, 1993 in geology, when I suggested that the subcontinental lithospheric mantle was formed by progressive stacking of a whole bunch of accreted slabs that broke off, and they broke off at some level a couple hundred kilometers down. But there's no quantitative depth on our way to estimate the depth from that paper. This is just based on geophysics and some geology, okay? But now, after 20 years of mapping in China, we have some interesting results that I think we're making some progress, okay? We're making progress. And it's time for us to talk to the rest of you in the world about this. So here is the central orogenic belt in the North China block. I'm not sure I want to call it a craton anymore. The eastern block probably consists of a bunch of accreted arcs or something that are older than 2.7, but the central orogenic belt is a terrain, probably a couple of arcs, but they certainly collided with the eastern block at 2.5 billion years ago. And we look at this area right here, eastern Hebei. Here's a suture right here between the older gneissic terrains over here, which have arc-type affinities. And here's an accretionary wedge type thing. So we're going to focus on this one over here. And we've published a lot of work on this. So here is one of our maps for this place right here. See figure 2 right here. So we'll look at this place. This is very interesting because this is an accretionary ophiolitic melange. It reminds me exactly of the accretionary ophiolitic melanges in Alaska. It has the same groups of rocks over here. Oops, I'm spinning the wrong buttons here. We have Harzbergites, a little bit of larzolites. We have a little bit of peroxenite. We have layered gabbros. We have gabbros. We have diabates. We have amphibolites and locally a little pillow lavas. And this paper that I show here by one of my PhD students, Wenbin Ning, has shown that the lava sequence is petrogenetically and geochronologically related to the depleted mantle sequence. So we have a temporally and geochemically related sequence of 4-arc ophiolite that's around 2.55 billion years old, okay? This is what the rocks look like in the field. They're kind of a mess. We do these grid maps. You see strings on the outcrops and people hanging on ropes to map them. So this is why we're getting drones now. We're doing it in 3D now. But these are metasedimentary matrix with blocks of ultramafic rocks, mafic rocks, and peroxenites and gabbros. And within them, they have these serpentinized used to be dunite with nodular and orbicular chromites. So here's some over here. And we have very good geochronological constraints. So cut by 2.5 billion-year-old granite veins, dikes, and 2.46 billion-year-old quartz, very fluid-rich event going on at the late stages of this orogenic event. So we do detailed maps all over the place. Many, 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 many. They look like this. So they're published in many papers. I don't need to go through them. So here is a summary of the geochronology to convince you that this is Archean. So we have all of the detrital zircons, all of the different ages from lutetium, hafnium, rhenium, osmium, uranium, lead, zircon, lead on the mafic rocks and cross-cutting granite dikes. Everything comes out to be late Archean. With the late quartz veins, you just saw one 2.48 billion years old. Okay, so we're talking about something that's the close of the Archean and just the start of the Paleoproterozoic, this tectonic event. And then, of course, they're cut by very young things. So, excuse me, I need a drink, coffee. So let's look. This is back to the same map. So I want to focus this talk on a certain group of these blocks in the melange, okay? So this is part of the ophiolitic melange. So this place here is called Maojikong. This is Maojikong right here. So this black thing is an ultramafic block in the melange. And it's this little black thing right here, okay? And this one down here is called Zuling, which is this little tiny dot over here. So this is our detailed maps, and I don't need to show more detailed maps, but we do have them. So we'll look at this one and this one because they have very interesting relationships. But just please note that this big one is concordant to the regional foliation in the Harzbergite, and this one is discordant and it cuts across it. That's very important. The field looks like this, or at least it used to. Now this quarry is filled up with water. So here's the ultramafic block over here. And here's the surrounding metasedimentary gneiss in the melange, cut by these 2.5 billion-year-old granite dikes, okay? So here is the Harzbergite tectonite foliation. This is the podiform chromite cut by the discordant podiform chromite dike. It's really strange. Here's a Harzbergite block in the metasedimentary matrix, and here's one with a great big alteration halo around it, and then different textures in the Harzbergite tectonite, and you can see these nodular and orbicular chromites. They get very interesting. So this is typically what it looks like. Here's the Harzbergite tectonite, and this is a serpentinized dunite with the little black things being the chromites. And here's one of these dike-like bodies that is extended by late extension. I'm not going to talk much about the chemistry of the chromites. We have several papers recently on these, but the chemistry of our chromites and color here are completely within the field of modern ophiolitic podiform chromites. There's no difference in between our Archean podiform chromites and the young ones. The only difference is if you look at the altered rims of the chromites and you plot them, they get to be very iron rich. They get to be ferrichromites, like over here. So if you look at the unaltered parts, then the analyses are good. So some people who report chromites composition and they're not careful about what they use, you have to be really careful, okay? These are certainly here. Now let's get to the good stuff. So here's a collection of my samples. Okay, what I see here is first we start with let me just tell you, the black stuff is chromite and the light stuff is serpentinized dunite or olivine, okay? So first we have like a net-like texture and we can either have disseminated. Then we get these really weird textures. We have nodular things and we have ring-like textures, okay? And they get to be big and they seem to have a little bit of dunite within them. And some of them are layered, like layered complex is over here. So there's a whole range of textures. And we have a new PhD student working on these right now, and he's finding some amazing things. But let's look at the microscope a little bit, okay? So this is where it starts to get really unusual. So here's one texture. This is a typical cubic chromite, okay? But it has it seems it grows inwards or something. Here's a happy face, a smile and two eyes, whatever. So that's a cubic chromite. But the things that are very distinctive that you only see in ophiolitic chromites, you don't see in continental layered intrusions, are these nodular textures like this and orbicular textures like this. And the thing that bothered me for a long time is that these orbicular textures, they have very smooth outer rims, but they have cubic negative crystal shapes on the inside. It's like they're growing inwards, and they are growing inwards. And as they grow inwards, they're trapping whatever was there in the melt at that time. They're growing in, and they're trapping either the melt inclusions or xenocrysts or anything that was coming up in this magma. So I'll show you a petrogenic model later, and I welcome your comments. So we start to look at this in detail using our SEM and EDS and EBSD, and we look at thousands and thousands of these inclusions. And I derived a way to look at these. If we trap a melt inclusion, it should have a surface tension, and it should be kind of like round, like a bubble, right? If we trap a previous crystal, it should have a different shape, like the shape of the crystal and there. So you don't have to read all the different things. So we look at thousands of these. So things like this, where we have protuberances of the biotite coming into the chromite. The chromite is the gray stuff on the outside over here. Or if we have the tremolite and the rutile sticking out like this, these were crystals when they were incorporated into the melt. But other things like this round one here has a potential to have been a melt inclusion. Okay, so we have to look at the microstructures very carefully before we interpret how to do this. And it's kind of a new science. Some people have done some things before. So we're trying to push limits and certainly welcome comments from anybody in the audience. So far, we have identified all these different mineral species as inclusions: silicates, base metal minerals, platinum group minerals, oxides, and try to classify them in single phase or double phase or multi-phase or four phase. But I don't think that's the best way. So we look instead at the focused, more detailed, using transmission electron microscopy to look at the relationships, microstructural relationships between the inclusions and the host chromite. Okay, so this basically, I think probably most people listening know about focused ion beam. You take a really thin beam and a thin foil and cut it out, and you can look really closely. So let's look at some of these. This is now going to the transmission electron microscopy scale, 5 microns, okay? So look at this one. So think about what this means. This one here is, this is from here, 500 microns to 5 microns. This is a chromite inclusion inside an olivine inclusion, inside a chromite inclusion, inside a dunite inclusion, in a Harzbergite block, in an ophiolitic melange, in an orogenic belt, in a craton forming part of a continent. Is this like a bump on the log on the frog on the lot, whatever you call it, right? Something like that. So it's telling us these things are going around. So we're getting into a mess here. And the olivine here is altered around the edges with, I'll show you later, with water. So we look at other things. So here's the chromite again. We have other things. I can't see my whole screen for some reason. But ensitite, which is normally anhydrous, okay, nominally anhydrous, the ensitite inclusion look, see the dark rim again? What's happening here? It's being altered to serpentinite inside the chromite. Okay, so this enstatite inclusion was encountering water before it was included in the chromite. Okay, because there are no cracks we can see in the chromite. So this happened before it was included. So the enstatite was altered with water, and then the chromite trapped it. So it's telling us part of the history of whatever happened. Now I will give you my story, and you can debate it if you want. I hope you do. Okay. We can look at other things. Oh, we have hornblende. Now here's a hydrosilicate. Hornblende is included inside the chromites as well. So my first idea is that if we have something, this is an ophiolitic melange, remember, it's caught here. So we have to get these carbonates. I didn't say the carbonates yet, but we have to get the amphibole and the enstatite and the other stuff up into here. So somehow we have to get them down and bring them back up. So we have to have something like a subduction channel and a transfer of material from the downgoing plate to the overriding plate. And one of the ways to do that are in these serpentinite diapirs that transfer material to the overriding plate. That's an idea. We also have base metal mineral inclusions with dolomite, calcite, and hydrite, chlorite, and stuff like that. Base metals are typically associated with continental type Mississippi Valley type deposits or other types of things. They form in mineral deposits, very common. Then we have some really more interesting things, perhaps. We have carbonaceous mineral phase inclusions. We have dolomite, calcite, and we have different polymers of just graphite. Okay, so this graphite stuff, these are amorphous graphite. Okay, amorphous. So these are carbides. It's very strange. So this is suggesting probably there were diamonds or something. I don't know. We have other ones that I don't have pictures of right now that are just circular inclusions of the same amorphous graphite that might have been diamonds that we verted, but we don't have any diamonds yet. So we're looking. Okay. So where do we find these kinds of carbonaceous mineral inclusions all over the world? We have, this is the one we're looking at here, but all these other ophiolites over here, Lubosa is very well studied, Radies in Russia, Pozanti in Turkey, and all these other ones over here. They have carbonaceous inclusions. So inclusions in ophiolites and podiform chromites are telling us something about the carbon cycle on Earth. And some of them have yielded diamonds, particularly Lubosa. And we're finding amorphous carbon in the Archean. And we're just starting a more detailed study with one of our students, Huawei, who I think is probably, yeah, there he is. Hi, Huawei, I see your name there, who's looking at this. Then we have something else. We have platinum group minerals, and here's one that's really bizarre, osmium iridium. Look at this. Look at this spectra over here. Osmium iridium rutile sulfur phase. Nobody has ever described this before. We don't know what it is or why it's there. I don't understand it. But here it is. We found it. Okay. What do you think, Luke? Something weird.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. I don't know how to explain it, but there it is. So then we have oxides. We have titanium dioxide, okay, TiO2. And typically we call this rutile, okay? And rutile is a common mineral that we find in crustal rocks, and we find it all over the place over here. And So we interpret this as something that was transferred from the crust down the subduction channel, then transferred to the mantle wedge by the mechanism I prefer this week about serpentinite diapirs being put up, and then the magma will capture it when it's moving up from slab retreat. We'll see in a minute. So here we have a few other things, phosphates and sulfates. So these, whatever the melt is that's coming up, is capturing all of these rocks, all these minerals, some which obviously come from subducted crust, and some which could come from being normal mantle minerals over there, okay? But we don't really know how deep they're coming from. So here's a petrogenetic model that I put together from the ABC, is basically the thoughts of Arai from Japan, and also put together by Wu from China recently, where we have a bonanitic type melt, high magnesium melt that comes and it interacts with the Harzburgite, and it makes a dunitic type melt eventually by the chemical reactions to take the magnesium out of the Harzburgite and stuff. I don't want to go into that. But when the melt is coming up, it can incorporate all of these different inclusions from either the mantle or from the crust, if we have serpentinite diapirs. So the idea is, I can't use my hands like I usually do. If this slab is rolling back and the melt is moving up from some particular depth, it can capture mantle minerals and capture things from the serpentinite diapirs coming out of the subduction channel and record a history of the subduction and whatever the mantle is at this particular time as it rises up to here to make the 4-arc ophiolite, okay? And this is all of these sketches, except for this one, which is based on a paper by Mati, I forget the name, Mati. But these are based on our field sketches, this one, this one, this one over here, okay? And this is interesting because we need some dynamics of flow as well. See, here is the flow, and here we have chromite. It looks like it's spinning around. So this chromite is not sitting passively, it's spinning while it's crystallizing. So how deep was it? Okay, you see in this diagram over here, there's no depth on purpose because all the minerals I talked about so far, there's no way to constrain the depth. So now we find this. We find one of the inclusions, a multi-phase inclusion. Number 2 is not rutile anymore, it's TiO2, which is a polymorph of rutile that converts at high pressure greater than 7.5 gigapascals, or it can be 9 gigapascals over there. We have particular constraints from our petrographic observations that these chromites crystallize at greater than 1,000 degrees Celsius, maybe 1,200 degrees Celsius over here. And we have, see, it's with apatite. I didn't talk too much about this, but apatite will convert to its ultra high pressure phase. It's called 2-ite when it's over 1,200 degrees, over 9 gigapascals. So we can say from these relationships where apatite is not 2-ite, but rutile is now TiO2, that we're somewhere between 7.5 and 9 gigapascals using the phase diagrams over here. And there are many more in the paper we just published in Precambrian Research. But there's a problem. I'll just confirm. We have all the diffraction patterns to show that it is TiO2, and the crystallographic orientations have all changed and stuff like that. It's very well confirmed by Richard Wirth from GFZ in Potsdam. Okay, so now from that diagram we can come down to say that this process is happening at least to 270 kilometers. Okay, so we're subducting the crustal materials, the passive margin and the and the ophiolitic stuff to at least 270 kilometers, at least. It could be 400. But we have to be really careful for possible overpressure, because these are inclusions within chromite, and it's multi-phase inclusion, and they have different coefficients of thermal expansion. So when it's coming down, the amphibole is expanding, and the apatite is doing this, and the chromite is doing this. So we picked the lower one. Instead of 9 gigapascals, we picked the lower one to say, conservatively, we're at least at 270 kilometers, okay? Or 7.5 gigapascals, I should say more accurately, okay? But then, the student who was working on this, just look at the chromite. It turns out that outside of these inclusions, the chromite was not chromite anymore. The crystallographic orientations of the chromite were changed from cubic to orthorhombic. This is called Cheminite, okay? Cheminite is the ultra-high pressure phase of chromite that only happens above 14 gigapascals, which puts us at the mantle transition zone, 14 gigapascals. Chromite is cubic, like right here. Cheminite is orthorhombic, and we have it confirmed with lots of different ways with the crystallographic structures. So here we have ultra-high pressure TiO2 surrounded by little remnants of cheminite in the host. So the idea is that somehow we are down here by the chromite cheminite transition. And in the paper under review, I'm suggesting that the chromite is crystallizing here as an immiscible silicate oxide droplets in a fluid from an older subduction zone, 2.7. Our rhenium-osmium ages, which have large errors at present, are 2.7 and another group of 2.5. And then these melts somehow came up from this other subduction zone, which is the melange we're looking at over here, as it was rolling back. And these are numerical models from our group and Claudio Facena and using Underworld. So this melt could rise up along the suction induced by the rolling back slab and come up here and trap all these minerals in the model that I just showed before, okay? So then if this is true, then we would have a depth that subduction lasted on in the Archean to at least 270 and probably to the mantle transition zone to 400 and something kilometers, okay? If you believe all this. So this origin, the central orogenic belt here, okay, is 1,600 kilometers long, all right? And we've been talking about this area up here. And we have some new results from other places. Here's from a former PhD student who's now a young professor here at CAG, Bo Huang. I'm not sure if he's listening. I think he probably is. But he identified a paired metamorphic belt in this area, Dengfeng complex, using the criteria of Mike Brown, where we have high temperature, low pressure metamorphism coupled with kind of low, but not really low, medium temperature, pressure metamorphism in an accretionary wedge. And through his structural mapping in this area, shows that they are spatially and temporally related. And this is a signature of plate tectonics and subduction in any origin of any age. And now I have to talk about something else. We have a paper coming out, I guess maybe tomorrow in Nature Communications, about maybe how far did we go laterally. We're talking about how far did the plate sink down now. So we have another student, Yating Zhang, who works with us. We've been working in this area in between Dengfeng down in the south and this area in Eastern Hebei, and we find these great big naps, and they're incredibly deformed. They're deformed into giant sheath folds, okay? But the recent work on here on the structural geology, we define the geometry as sheath folds, and the ages are that the bonanites and morbs are 2.698 billion years old, and the time of abduction of these rocks over the passive margin are 2.52 billion years old. So if we assume a very conservative rate of plate convergence, we have a 178 million years to go from the subduction initiation to the pushing of these rocks on top of the older passive margin to make this fold frost nap belt. So we say 2 centimeters a year, just guess. So we say 3,560 kilometers of oceanic crust was destroyed here. So that would mean that the evidence that I just showed you for subduction to 400 kilometers has to be repeated about 9 times to get rid of this ocean, okay? So I'm only supposed to talk for 40 minutes and it's 39 now. So this has nothing to do with our work, but some people in the audience are really interested in this. So I'm just saying that we're talking about something happening here at the red arrow at 2.5 billion years ago. And I think we have pretty good evidence for subduction at 2.5 billion years ago, maybe 2.7 billion years ago. But something else happened on Earth around then. The great oxidation event started. And I don't know if there's any link or not, but some of you might have good ideas. Okay, so I will leave that open for some questions. Okay, and 40 minutes is now. So here's some of us. This is Huang, who did a lot of the DM work. Richard Wirth. This is Lu Wang, some of you know. This is some fat guy here. All right, so questions are open. All right.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you for this comprehensive talk.